After training calisthenics for a year and a half and training nearly 5 years total, I've learned a ton of lessons about training, getting stronger, and how to properly progress. So much so that within this very short period of time, I've gotten to 50 kilos for weighted pull-ups and weighted dips. That's 110 pounds for the American people. Freedom units, let's go. 70 plus handstand push-ups in one workout, 90-degree handstand push-ups, really explosive muscle-ups, really crazy one-arm pull-ups, full front levers, all these types of things, and much more. In this video, I'm going to be going over the 3 most important lessons that I've learned during this time. And if you want dozens more, you can sign up for my Maloney Athlete Academy. First link in the description. Without further ado, we can get straight into the video. The first lesson that I've learned is that frequency for calisthenic skills is absolutely crucial. When you look at gymnasts, which is probably like the closest thing on like a global scale that you can compare to calisthenics, the number one thing that you always tend to see with very high level gymnasts is that they train very often and they train very long hours. This is because, and there's a ton of reasons, but one of the main reasons is that your body weight never really changes. So once you get really good at a skill, let's say handstand push-ups, for example, because it's the perfect example. Once you get good at handstand push-ups, for example, if you're able to do 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 handstand push-ups in a given session, the best way to progress is actually a very boring way. If you're able to do 100 handstand push-ups in a session, you're doing tons of sets of like 5 to 10 reps. You're focusing on form, you're focusing on actually getting good at the skill, and you're not actually like gritting and grinding that hard. When you are learning these skills, the most important 2 things are volume and frequency, and being able to train these skills more often is going to allow you to train these skills more often while you're fresh. So just adding volume, for example, if in the difference between doing 10 sets once a week versus doing 5 sets twice a week, both totaling to 10, is that if you do 10 sets one time a week in the tail end of that session during the last 4, 5, 6 sets, whatever, you're actually going to be like considerably weaker than you were in the beginning of the set. So you're not going to have the time to adapt, because if you've been training for a while, you stimulate, you rest, and then you adapt. So you're a little bit stronger, you add 1.25 kilos, add 2.5 kilos, add 5 pounds, whatever, you progress. And then next session, you're even stronger and you get to do the same session, just slightly heavier or with 1 or 2 added reps. With skills, it's very similar. You want to give yourself time to adapt and let your body learn internally and kind of reset the wiring within your brain and like your spinal cord to your muscles and actually allow you to do the skill properly. Giving a little bit more context on this, back to like the volume situation I was giving before, how you properly progress on handstand push-ups isn't doing 2 to 3 sets, 4 to 5 sets of your max number of reps. It's doing 8 to 10 to 12 to 20 sets of a very easy amount of reps. If you're able to do, let's say, 5 in a row, that's like 10 sets of 2 that you would be doing in order to progress. The reason is you want your first sets to be really easy so you can groove in the movement very, very easily. You're being able to do tons of volume. Yes, it's going to be a little bit more pressure on your joints, but if you've been doing calisthenics for a while, you've kind of signed up for that. You're going to be able to practice the movement a lot more when doing higher volumes. And when you're doing higher volumes and you're keeping your intensity fairly low, you're able to do more frequency. And frequency is the number one thing for skills especially, but also for weights. So practicing the movement more, getting more neurologically adept to the movement instead of just like throwing out intensity, 2-set method, Ian Barsicle, like that type of thing. You're actually going to be able to make a lot more progress, a lot quicker, and a lot more steady when you do higher volume, lower intensity, still periods where you ramp up the intensity. I'm not telling you to keep 10 reps in reserve when you're doing weightlifting exercises. Obviously, weightlifting and calisthenics are different, which is what my second point is. My second point is calisthenics is not bodybuilding and not powerlifting either. They're all different sports. You need to treat them all a little bit different, and you can take principles from each of them, but calisthenics is unique. When it comes to purely the calisthenic skills, not talking about street lifting, not talking about endurance aspects, when it comes purely to the skills, they are trained uniquely from every other sport. So you need to perform them in a way that, especially top experts and coaches say, top athletes say, but in a way that genuinely just works for you, because it's such a niche sport and it's not like globally recognized like powerlifting, like Olympic weightlifting, like bodybuilding, that we have so many studies comparing. Oh, this method versus this method, that one's for sure better because 10 studies says that it's better. For calisthenics, we don't have that. It's kind of just what the best athletes say, what the best coaches say, practical experience, personal experience, all of those types of things, and you kind of have to guess on your own. When doing these movements, though, I can almost assure you you that every single coach that I have met and talked to and everybody that I've worked with, 9 times out of 10, unless it's like a very intense skill, like one-arm pull-ups or even one-arm pull-ups, once you get good at them, it's kind of the same thing. When you're first learning one-arm pull-ups, is a little bit different. But let's say you can do like 3, 4 one-arm pull-ups, whether it's one-arm pull-ups, whether it's front lever holds, planche holds. I got to like a pretty decent straddle planche for a little bit. Handstand push-ups, 9-degree handstand push-ups. So you all actually progress in a fairly similar way. And when I say similar, I mean most statics progress in a very similar way as other statics, and dynamic movements like handstand push-ups, muscle-ups actually progress in a very similar way to each other as well, because they're similar, but they're different. And if you try and compare it to a sport like Olympic weightlifting or powerlifting or bodybuilding, you're not going to be able to progress the actual best that you can, because it's a different sport. It's a different type of progression, and you have to fit it to the actual like modality of calisthenics specifically. Third thing, specificity is king. There are so many guys online who are pushing 2-set methods, who are pushing, oh, you need to get better at weights first, you need to get better at muscle-ups, and then, or you need to be getting better at weighted pull-ups, and then you'll be able to do muscle-ups. That's all true on a very basic level. Yes, if you're able to dip more, if you're able to do more with weighted pull-ups, your muscle-ups will have the potential to get better. Your handstand push-ups, you'll have potential to do more reps, but not actually training the skill isn't going to allow you to be better at the skill. It's like if you started running, for example, and you got really good endurance, you have the world record marathon time. If you get into boxing, the whole, like a big aspect of boxing is don't get tired. You're probably not going to get tired, but you don't know how to box. It's the same thing with getting strong versus doing skills. Yes, you can be strong. You can be dipping 100 kilos for reps at 50 kilos body weight. But if you're not actually able to balance in handstand, if you're not able to have the straight arm strength and scapular control and all that type of stuff for planche, if you don't have the wrist strength or the conditioning or any of that stuff, then you're not going to be actually able to do the skill. Think about it like a pyramid. You do your basic strength, which is like your weighted dips, your weighted pull-ups, your rows, your incline presses, all this type of stuff. That's on the bottom layer. Then as you branch up, you get more and more specific to the skill. So how you would structure a workout, for example, is if we're doing handstand push-ups or push, for example, let's say your main movements are, let's say you're trying to do more of like a hybrid approach, or you're trying to combine skills with strength and then some hypertrophy training. So this is like a general push day. You would do your, let's say you're even able to do 90-degree handstand push-ups. You would start couple of sets of 90-degree handstand push-ups, relatively low intensity. Maybe you'd have a separate day where you do only skills. That's what I recommend people who are trying to learn skills. Very select cases is when, like, I'll have a coaching client or something and their goal is skills, and I'll have them do like a session where they do both at the same time, but I wouldn't have them do a purely skill day. That's a little bit weird for me. But let's say you're combining the two of them. You would do a few sets of 9-degree handstand push-ups, keep it easy, maybe 1 rep, 2 rep, 3 rep, whatever, depending on how many you can do. So I would say like roughly 50% intensity for those. You would go over to handstand push-ups. Let's say you're able to do 5 in a row. You would do a couple sets of 3, a couple sets of 2, upping the amount of volume, but keeping the intensity relatively low. 1, because that's the best way to progress in handstand push-ups. But 2, you have weighted dips right after. You have bench right after, whatever your strength exercise is. For me, it's bench. You go onto your bench press. Let's say you do a 3x3. You do your 3x3, you high rest time, you go relatively intense. You're going to be a little bit weaker than you otherwise would be if you would just skip the handstand push-ups, but you don't do enough to where it's going to tire you that much. Maybe it shaves off like 5 kilos, or maybe it shaves off like 1 rep total for the session. It'll make a small difference, but it shouldn't be that big of a difference. Then you can go into like your more bodybuilding style work, where you do your accessory exercises, slower tempo, pause at the bottom, press up. You would do your flies, same thing. You can do your lateral raises or your tricep extensions or any of that type of stuff. And you combine it in a way that makes sense. If your goal is strength, you wouldn't do a ton of skill work and then a ton of hypertrophy work and then do a 3x3 at the end of your workout. That's retarded. You understand that. You need to format it in a way that's coherent with your goals, and you need to pick a priority. So if your priority right now is bench, for example, or weighted dips, for example, if that's your priority, you might even do it before you do your skill work. So you do weighted dips, and then you would do 9-degree handstand push-ups, and then you do handstand push-ups. And it'll be a little bit random when you progress, because maybe you're not really good at them. The only people who can kind of progress at the same time when they do both things and they start with weightlifting are people who are already pretty good at the skill. You might even regress a little bit. That's completely fine. There is absolutely no issue with that. You just need to get to the point to where you're stable, you're maintaining your progress, and then when you go back to prioritizing one or the other, that's when you actually get to the level to where you're progressing in both. And you can do this through a ton of different ways. the way I like to look at it is like through a basic periodization model. You have periods where you focus only on skills and mostly on skills, and you just maintain your strength. You kind of don't do a ton of accessory work, so you don't do like a ton of isolations or anything. No like side delts, no like sexy muscles, basically. None of that stuff. You focus mostly on skills and a little bit of strength, and then you can transition into strength. So you do a little bit of skills, maybe a little bit more hypertrophy stuff than you otherwise would, and then you can transition if you don't care about skills as much anymore. You're to such a high level to where you're just maintaining by doing like 2 reps, 3 reps, whatever, to where it's like kind of brain dead training. It's really easy for you to do like explosive muscle ups and to do handstand push-ups and all that type of stuff. And then you do barely any skills, then you do some strength work, and then you do some hypertrophy work. A lot of people give you like time ranges of how to do this, and I don't really like that because different experience levels have completely different time frames for how they need to train. A lot of people say, you probably heard of like a deload week, for example. A lot of people say like, oh, you need to deload every 4 to 6 weeks. That's not true, because a beginner who's never taken a deload before, even if they're training 10 out of 10 perfectly, like with a coach, and they're pushing hard and they're managing their volume and their maximal recoverable volume and their stimulus to fatigue ratio is like good or whatever, they could still train hard for a whole year before they get to the point to where they need to take their first deload. Why are we going to tell a beginner, oh, 4 to 8 weeks, you need to take a deload? That's obviously not true. You need to format it kind of more in an intuitive manner. And this is what I like about, if you look up the channel, Super Clarkson, however you say his name, he's the Estonian guy. I called him Italian in an old video. And if he ever saw that, he would probably like want to shoot me. But he's an Estonian guy. He's like pretty advanced athlete, been training for 10 years, all that kind of stuff. He has a very like high level intuitive approach, and like his product, like his paid product, kind of like I have one, his paid product is teaching you how to intuitively train and like match your skill level with your body and how to actually progress without like a training program. That's all good and awesome. That's awesome. He's literally showing you like a periodization model in the short term. What I'm saying is do it more long term. So you have a period where you have a goal that's maybe more a little bit hypertrophy focused. You want to get bigger arms, you want to up how much weight you are, you want to go from 60 kilos to 64 kilos, 64 kilos to 70 kilos, something along those lines. You want to prioritize arm training, you want to get bigger, you want to get like a little bit stronger, but not really, and you kind of want to maintain your skills. Set up a goal like that, and then go towards that goal as long as you can, basically until you burn out with it, or you just don't kind of want to do it anymore, typically after like 1 to 3 months, for me at least. Then what you would do is you go on to the next thing. You're like, okay, I got a bunch bigger. I know when I have more muscle, I have more potential to be stronger. Again, back to the pyramid, it's back to the potential when you build muscle, back to the potential when you build strength, transferring the skills. You know, okay, I have more muscle now. Now I'm actually going to really crack down on my strength training. That's awesome. You get into strength training, get into a little bit of skills training. Now you're like, wow, I'm the strongest I've ever been, even pound for pound. I've gained a little bit of weight, but I'm the strongest I've ever been. I know when I switch over to skills and I prioritize them for a few months, I'm actually going to be stronger than I've ever been at skills. And I'm going to be breaking skills PRs like crazy. That's been everything. I just want to say, if you're interested in content like this, where it's more like sit down, like I'm at a desk, or like I'll show you my screen or any of that type of stuff, and I'm literally explaining to you how to learn each skill and how to progress in each individual way, and you want to vote on the courses that you get and vote on the knowledge that I give you, and literally be able to tell me, literally like 1-to-1 basically, because like there's community posts and all this type of stuff. You can literally make a post in a thread and I get to see it and I respond to it, and sometimes I leave people like 20-minute video replies where I explain to them exactly what their problem is and how they can fix it. It's like such an awesome thing. And like my like community slash course slash calls and all that type of stuff, it literally has everything you could possibly imagine. It has courses on how to train skills. It has community aspects. It has a map where when more people join, you can literally meet your future best friend in there, because you get to see like their approximate location. It doesn't like DDoS you or anything. It doesn't like give your like exact location, but it gives like an approximate range of like where everybody is, and you can disable that if you want to. Obviously, like I'm not a weirdo. I'm not like, hey, you must keep it enabled. Like whatever, you can disable it in the settings. I can tell you how to do that once you're inside. But it's just such an awesome thing. And it's so cheap. It is $29 a month USD, which is like a pair of shoes. And not even, it's like maybe like, I don't know, this might sound weird, but it's like a month worth of gum for me. I chew a lot of gum. You can see like the jawline. That has been everything. My name has been Brandon. Keep doing the best of doing your best. Trust God. Signing off.